Right, guys, welcome back to Coaching Conversations with Pete Yas. But before we get to today's episode, just a quick announcement from our partnership with St Mary's University Twickenham.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm Ashley, our performance football coaching course lead, as you know, as a member of our alumni. Our course is unique around the world, so we believe that we have a distance learning model that kind of works for everyone, regardless of where they are in the world. They can study football performance coaching from their environment and put it into their context.
Amazing. And who is it for?
So we really have lots of different unique opportunities. So you can be a pro licensed coach that we've had in the past. You could be a level 2 UEFA B coach. It's about putting it into your context. So we'll expose students to match analysis, contemporary football coaching cultures, and they can put that into their own practice and improve their knowledge and understanding of the game.
Thank you for that, Ash. And as an alumni member of St Mary's University Twickenham, I'm proud to announce the partnership that we've got going on, where each week myself and Pete will be delivering conversations around different how-to elements, analysis tips, and obviously some insights from our own experiences as coaches and coach developers. So catch that on YouTube and every week on all major platforms where you can hear it in audio form as well. Right, guys, welcome back to Coaching Conversation with Pete Yas. My name's Yas, and I'm a UEFA A licensed coach and coach developer.
Hi, I'm Pete, and I'm also a UEFA A coach. And what else am I? Oh yeah, I'm a
Granddad.
I'm a granddad. Well, I'm not actually a granddad.
Not yet. We've got a very special guest with us today. None other than Mark Rivers. Good evening.
Yeah,
good
thank
afternoon,
you.
Mark, rather.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. What sort of setup is this that I've come to? You don't even know what level of coach he is.
I don't know. I don't.
Mark, let's dive straight in. Obviously, it's really important for us to say that it's a pleasure for us to have you here. More importantly, to identify who you are and what you do. So maybe just give us a brief insight around that, and then we'll dive straight into today's topic.
Yeah, so currently pre-academy manager at Arsenal. Been at Arsenal for about sort of 3.5 years now. And then prior to that, met this very handsome man to the side of me.
Where is he?
This was at the FA, yeah. So 10 years at the English Football Association. More recently there as a county coach developer, so delivering like the FA level 1s, level 2s, UEFA Bs. I know some of the names have changed now. And then going out and supporting coaches with in-situ visits, etc. And then prior to that, the club work, community stuff, which is really dear to my heart, and academy football through the phases. So yeah, pretty busy time in the last 30 odd years.
Wasn't even born.
All right. you was.
Just about. No, it's really good to kind of get a real brief insight around your journey. Obviously, you managed to pack the best part of 30 years in about 30 seconds there. So there's a lot to go into, and I really want to kind of touch on your role and something that's quite prominent within it. Working in academy football in particular, there's been a real, I guess, surge of this idea around player care. So straight off the bat, what is player care for those that don't quite know what it is, and what's your perceptions of it?
Yeah, I mean, most academies now have someone who's full time in that sort of player care role. From a coaching background, I think our role as coaches has changed exponentially over the last 10 years. We use the word practitioner now, and I think that's right. I mean, it's such an eclectic mix to what we're trying to do. Those days of just doing the stuff on the grass or on a tactics board, I think are gone. I think the players are demanding more. Other coaches more, other practitioners around the ground are demanding more, and I think we need to know and have a real understanding of who we're coaching first and foremost, like a real idea of who these players are, get a real sort of deep connection with them to understand that when there's times that, like us, you're not feeling 100%, which will transfer onto the pitch in terms of performances, then we need to be able to support them. But I think it stems back to really knowing them first of all. The world that I live in is pre-academy, so you're looking at under 8s. So if you think about ages and stages with under 8s, you think about, it's a long time ago for you, Pete, you think about when you were 8, but, we were all over the place. In terms of emotional regulation, we were all over the place, weren't we? And I think we need to do our best, before it gets to the player care staff, to really understand who we're working with.
No, I think it's some great points then. I think, just want to kind of ask you the question, Pete, what does player care mean to you? Because I guess, Mark's touched on the idea that players are becoming more demanding. I guess the environments have changed. One of the things I've always kind of thought, well, is player care just a word that's now being used, but it's always been present, or is it just not been there? And obviously, I can appreciate and understand that there might be more emphasis on it now. But is it a completely new thing, or is that just a myth?
No, I think it's pretty new. I think before players, how the players felt wasn't really taken into consideration. It was more around this idea of, oh, well, that player, they're not doing it, so they get dropped out the team, or if there was something going on in their personal life, they wouldn't share that with anyone. They would just think that they had to basically tough it out. And I think player care now means that if we see that a player is struggling, is that it should send up a red flag to us. And I think that's a good thing that's happening in football now, is that we have that, isn't it? That, we have this thing where there's a red flag, especially like you're saying, Mark, for yourself, pre-academy.
Yeah.
You're really talking about the babies, aren't you? 7 years old. Some might be even younger than that, mightn't they, at times?
Yeah.
And imagine, at that age, and you love football, and then somebody gives you a T-shirt of a professional football club. Kids' imagination is massive anyway. Imagine now you're in that environment where you're playing for your favourite team, and around that, what happens on the day when somebody looks at you and says, "You're not good enough," at that elite level? What does that do to the child? So being able to look after the child during those, especially those early formative years, is absolutely crucial, I think.
Yeah, it is, and you're right. We get them in from such a young age, and I think what can be misleading sometimes is they, far surpass their years on a football pitch. Some of these boys, and I say boys because that's where I'm working at the minute, of that age. Some of the things that they can do with the ball is just beyond me. I just kind of stand back and laugh sometimes because it's really. And I thought I was all right at 8. And I've said it a few times. I would love to have some video footage of me as a 7 or 8 year old running around thinking that I was decent. These kids are another level. They really are, what they can do with the ball. And I think sometimes, we look at that, and we have to be careful with early specialisation, early professionalisation, and all of that stuff, and just really get to know them, because there'll be academy coaches listening to this who will have 15 boys, 20 boys, 30 boys that will come from completely different environments, different backgrounds, all of this stuff that we need to take into consideration. And even if you look at the senior level, you and I both worked in non-league and that, Pete. I remember 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the thing about music in the dressing rooms, and got to have music, it's going to pump everyone up, and going back, way back, Wimbledon, Crazy Gang, had the music in the changing rooms. But is that right for everyone? And someone said that to me, and I thought, but there was people in my team that wanted a quiet moment, whether it was to pray or whatever it was. Just let me I don't want all this noise in the background. So again, it's that real sort of deep, rich understanding, which I think is worth doing, trying to work out a little bit more about the players you're working with.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I'm just thinking that as you guys are speaking there, that Pete, you said it. It's a good thing in football that they've we're now considering these things, and I wonder how much of that is about football and not so much about society as a whole. There is obviously discussions around the fact that there's a consensus that maybe society's become a bit softer, a bit more aware. But it's I guess finding the right balance. You come back to the example you've just given about the music, as there's going to be players that don't really want that, and that's fine too. And I'm even thinking about even recently, beyond player care, I'm just thinking about from a coaching perspective. It was only recently, about 6 weeks ago, where I went to my first course where I was given an opportunity to have a prayer room. Do you know what I mean? It probably wouldn't even be a consideration. I remember having a conversation with a couple of coaches about this and saying, actually, back, I guess when I was coming through my coaching courses, you almost felt you had to make a decision. Am I going to miss out on content, or am I going to go and pray? But again, it's a similar thing for the players, right? I guess, are we in danger in some ways, do you think, maybe of overcompensating and maybe not holding players to a certain standard at sometimes, and not because this is the right way, but there's a I guess there's got to be a balance of how much is individualized and how much is, well, this is the expectation, right? And obviously taking into consideration individual differences and maybe cultural differences and obviously religious things as well that might come into play. But just on a general level, do you think we're maybe at danger of maybe trying to be too accommodating at times?
Nah, I don't think you can never be too accommodating. I think every environment has its limits, doesn't it? There's certain things you can do, certain things you can't do, and the environment itself will stop you from doing certain things. However, within that environment, and especially if you're talking about football, where you're talking, especially in the men's game, where you're talking about producing multi-million-pound assets, because that's what they are in the end. They're going to be assets. And how you deal with those people, those young people, as they come through the system, because don't forget, there's a lot of pressure on them. There's a pressure on them from their parents, because they want to see uncles, aunts, friends, all those people who are seeing this person as their identity comes through football. So if we then don't take care of them to ensure that if they have to leave that environment, that they're still they're going to be a useful member to society, then actually we're missing a trick here. So saying that at 6 or 7, again, I'll go back to Mark's example of being in the pre-academy. If we're talking about, are we being oversensitive or too sensitive? You think about if you've got your 6-year-old kid, how do you treat your 6-year-old kid? You treat them with sensitivity, don't you? You treat them with love. You treat them with care, because they're only 6, and just because they're in football doesn't mean to say that you all of a sudden, oh, you're a footballer now, so now we're going to treat you differently. No, you're still a child. Yeah, you still want to play. You still want to learn, innit? Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree, Pete. Yeah, I think that it's a societal thing. It's changed so much over the years. Us 3 here, I'm sure we would have. I'm just thinking about those long hot summers and playing outside in the back garden. I used to go out, 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, come back in 9 o'clock at night. Those days are gone. What we have got now is, whether we like it or not, social media, YouTube. So there's still places for the boys and girls to go to try and learn stuff.
This is going on YouTube,
Is it YouTube? What's YouTube? No, I'm joking. But I think from a neuroscientific point of view, I think there is a real body of work that we governing bodies need to do more on. I think it should be real, and I think it started to come in, but real prevalent on our courses when you start looking at, the disproportionate rates of poor mental health with men versus women, and the stats are all there. We don't need to go into them, and and then you take this culture that we're in, this academy football, and you're right, Pete, the pressures that come with it. But who's looking after the other side? Do we really see it? We can't be on all of the time, so it's being able to pick up subtly on signs and symptoms and recognise, not 100% today, I wonder why that is. And it might be a whole plethora of reasons as to why, but I think it would be, real poor practice if we didn't gain that understanding and at least recognise those signs to be able to pass things on. Or have a conversation about it, I think that side of our game is really important, and something that we wouldn't have had growing up in a changing room. There is no way, I think I'm safe in saying it, that I'm just thinking of an environment that I was in, that you'd be able to put your hand up and go, I'm struggling a little bit here, with lots of men around it. It just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't have been a safe and secure environment for me to be able to do that. So I think that's something that we have to create, and an environment where our players can question us as well. And it sounds probably quite obvious, but in all of my football growing up, I can't think of a moment where I was confident, if it was you, Pete, doing a session, to be able to question you and go, can you just show me again, because I didn't understand it. So I'd be the player then that would gravitate towards the back of the group and then just spy and have a look, see what Pete was doing. Yeah, now I get it. Because I wouldn't have questioned the coach for fear of everyone laughing at me. So that's some like neuroscience, polyvagal theory stuff, which I quite like.
I think it's such a great point. Just even on that final bit around making sure that the players have understood and even creating an environment where they feel safe enough, feel comfortable enough to ask questions of the coach. I mean, I don't know whether it's just because of how I grew up or my own personality, but something that was really big for me when I was coming up as a coach in my earlier years was, no, I want players to question me. Because actually for me, I just saw that as, that's my golden ticket. Because if they're asking me a question, I've got them engaged. And if they're engaged and they're asking questions, then this is the perfect opportunity for me to share my insight, my knowledge, and my experience with them around whatever it is that we're talking about, whether that's showing them the practice, whether that's detailing something specific for them. But equally, one of the things I learned in that process was it was an opportunity for me to be sure of what I'm saying. And I'm thinking about some of the recent experiences I've had with mentoring different coaches and supporting different coaches in some of the work that I do, and they kind of try and hide away from those opportunities because it's almost like, well, they're not comfortable to actually answer the question. It's like, well, no, if you're not comfortable answering the question, maybe you need to start asking yourself some questions.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think if we need to get better, at really losing those inhibitions, and these players that we're coaching, we live in this wonderful FIFA generation where these boys and girls, their knowledge of the game is fantastic, and we need to tap into it. And I think sometimes, I'm just thinking of my old coaches, but would hate to be questioned, for fear of losing face. Hold on a minute, I'm the coach here, I tell you what to do. If we can come away from that, and I've seen you work, and that is, someone asks you a question and it's, maybe that's something that I haven't covered. Maybe I haven't shown them, or catered for the third of the group that are visual learners, and I've got to go through something here. Maybe I need to run through it a bit more for those kinesthetic learners that are telling me that I'm talking too much because they're fidgeting on the floor. The body language is telling you, shut up, I want to get going. So trying to cater for all of those. So when someone questions you, your approach then, is as brilliant as, oh, hold on a minute, something that maybe I need to address.
But I think this is something that happens right the way through the football pyramid, and I don't think that it's just confined to the under eights or whatever it is. I mean, I'll give you a little example of the team that I'm coaching at the moment. One of the things I noticed, one of the players wasn't particularly playing as well as they had been 2 previous games, and I looked at the player, and your immediate thought is, oh, he's not at it. Actually, he's not at it. But then, well, what does that mean then? Is he actually playing badly, or is he just not playing at the standard he was? Well, okay, at the level, you're going to get peaks and troughs. But I noticed just in his demeanour, everything about him, he wasn't as smiley as he normally is. He doesn't crack as many jokes, that sort of stuff. So at halftime, I said to him, are you okay? And he said, he didn't want to say because he didn't want to come off. He says, and then eventually he says, yeah, I've got I think I've got a bit of flu. Right? Now, people might say, oh, that's nothing. But to him, he's come out of his house, he's left his house, he doesn't feel well, he wants to play. He knows if he doesn't play, or he doesn't turn up, that he might get dropped out the side. So the pressure on him, you're talking about non-league level, not conference, well below that. This guy's feeling that pressure. So when we're talking about looking after our players, it's noticing that this player wasn't feeling very well, having a little word with him, and then eventually we took him off because now I know he's got the flu. So now I know he's not feeling well. Now I know actually we're doing more harm to him than good by getting him to play with a virus, or I don't know if it's a virus they call it now, but he's and now I think he may not be fit enough to play in the next game because he's gone now. But it's those kind of things that we have to be aware of, that football matters to people at whatever level they're playing at.
I think that's a great point, and I think as you guys are speaking, that the one word that just keeps coming back in my head is observation, right? And I remember speaking to a coach recently about this and saying, we've got to be careful that we don't always think we know what good looks like for a player, or what hard work looks like for a player if we don't have context. Because hard work for me on a Monday might be different to hard work for me on a Thursday, because actually my week starts on a Saturday. But if you don't know that, you're judging me based on it being a Monday morning or whatever it looks like, and you're saying, well, why are you like this? Yeah, but my week started 2 days ago. It doesn't start on the Monday like everyone else. Or, you know, again, it's just context, right? And then understanding that my efforts shouldn't be determined on how they are perceived, but my effort should be determined on the actual effort that I'm applying, in the sense that I could be giving my 100% effort today, and how I perform in today's game or in today's session. And, you know, we've all been there, right? We haven't always had our best sessions, and sometimes we maybe are critical of ourselves in that, you know, I could have done better today, but actually, rather today wasn't as good as I know I can produce, but based on how I'm feeling and the week I'm having or whatever that looks like, you know what, actually, I think I did a pretty good job. So I think it's just understanding the context of what that looks like. And a phrase that I've often started using for coaches in particular is, we need to spend less time observing through our eyes and more time observing through the player's experience. And if we can start doing that a little bit more, then we just have to become more curious about understanding why players are doing what they're doing and what's having an influence and an impact on them. And then, you know, even going back to this whole player care situation, well, is it just the player that we're caring for? Who else are we connecting within that process? Who else are we aware of that we need to be connecting with, or just having some context around, if that makes sense?
Well, our whole thing should be around player first. So the player's got to come first. And then but then you've got, if you've got a small squad, say like a 5v5 squad, that might be 10 players that you've got to look after. But the point is, at the end of the day, getting to know the players within that and getting to know those 10 little characters, say, for example, or if you've got a big squad of 16, 18 and you're playing non-league, or your squad's 22, 23 and you're playing in League 1 or League 2, all those relationships have to be managed. And the point being is that knowing how you manage those individuals is really, really crucial. And player care is really about is how do you manage the individual? Because, as you were saying, if you're playing non-league and one of your players is a builder, they may have had a full day of maybe carrying bricks up ladders and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I'm using that as an example. And then you're saying to them, right now, we're going to go and do a really intense session. You've got to understand that actually that intense session ain't going to help that player, because they're already tired from the day's work. They come to football for not only the physical release, but the mental release.
Yeah.
The school kids, 6 or 7, who maybe just has changed schools, maybe having trouble in school for whatever reason, or everybody at school knows they're a footballer and they're playing at Arsenal, Chelsea, or wherever it is, and they're getting lauded and everything they do is seen as absolutely wonderful. But that's not the real world, because if they can drop out of that, well, the world don't look so rosy to them. So how do we then, all the adults around that child, how do they then deal with the child when they fall on hard times? I think that's really, really important that when we're talking about these things.
Yeah. I mean, I think I quite like using the mantra, blame the players last. That's something that just stuck with me. Whether it's the session that's not going quite well or someone's questioning me, I'll always blame exactly what you said, Yas. Hold on a minute, you know, how can I fix this immediately? And look, we're all completely different and we learn in completely different ways. I think what you've just alluded to, Pete, is something that's really concerning is, and again, it's out there, but these sort of FA's statistics on the dropout rate in the boys' game, I think it's around about under 14, something like that. You know, that is really concerning. And I've experienced it with my son, who, you know, at 16 doesn't play anymore. You know, and before we started recording, we were talking about this, and we were playing, you know, up until 40s, and whether it's five-a-side or whatever it is, but we were still playing, and we still had that love and passion for the game. And when you wind it all the way back, you know, these boys and girls, in most cases, are volunteers. You know, they turn up voluntary to play football and to be coached, and a byproduct of that, if we win, great. But also the social side. I've got a WhatsApp group now with friends from when I was in the under-8s. Like, we're still friends. And we got beat, honestly, 19-0, 20-0, all of this stuff. I can't tell you.
You, Pete.
Who was it? Yeah, Pete was the coach, actually.
Oh yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
You lot were rubbish, man.
It did turn around, actually, when we got to sort of 14 and 15, and
Pete left.
yeah,
I got a job in a supermarket.
Or
But in
carry
terms
the
of-
top a ladder.
yeah. But like when in terms of maturation and stuff, and we definitely won more than we lost. Anyway, the point is, we have got a group together. We've stayed together, and we had some wonderful times, and it's brought us all together. And we're here as coaches, as practitioners, as tutors, you know, through the love of the game. And we're fortunate enough to do jobs still in this game that we love. But that's the bit that concerns me at 14. Grassroots, the dropout rate. Then you add on top of that, you leave academy football, where you're right, you potentially are lauded about at schools, you're the next best thing, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're let go, and what that looks like, really.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, I think, because, you know, we know the statistics. Was it 99% of players who enter the system don't make it?
Correct. Yeah.
99%.
Yeah.
So when you enter that system, the truth of the matter is you're probably not going to make it. So how do we get that message across, but yet still keep the kids curious and wanting to be the best? Because that could actually go the other way. They go, I don't fancy going to, because I'm not going to make it. But my mate who's played over there, who's played a bit of non-league, they're making it. I mean, and I've, you know, what I do see a lot of is a lot of kids who come through later, you know, 17, 18, 19, and they may get a pro contract, say a League 1, League 2 club. They're in the game now, and now all of a sudden, you know, you see them, they then get a transfer. There's two lads I kind of worked with when I was one of the clubs I worked with, and they went in really late. One of them was, I think, must have been about 20. They got their first pro contract, did really, really well. Then they've just recently moved again. There were two players who did that in the same team that I was coaching at. And you think to yourself, what happens if they were in the system from maybe 8?
Yeah.
They probably, in fact, I think one of them, I think they were both in the system, both released from the system, and then they went into the non-league system and went that way, went grassroots, and then went back in again later on. So I think when we talk about player care, some of the things that we could easily do, I think, is every club, every professional club could be linked with a grassroots club. And so if a player drops out, they can go to that grassroots club, all right? And in that club are good coaches who may well have gone on CPD events or whatever, or post-coaching events where they've helped them to get better. So now the kid who drops out at, say, 10, maybe gets another chance because they're in with some good coaches. The problem often happens is that they drop out the game. There's nothing for them. Say, for example, they don't know quite where to go. And then, bang, you know, my whole demeanour is football. I mean, when I was watching one of those documentaries recently, and a kid, 12 years old, saying, I don't have another plan. You're 12. You don't have another plan?
Yeah.
You know? And the likelihood is you're not going to make it. That, to me, that's scary. That's really scary.
I think it just points out just how important it is that in this process, the players' expectations as well as that of the parents is just really managed and really, you know, given clarity to. And I think that's probably, you know, probably the key takeaway for me around any of this is just how transparent is that process of support, both during the process and after. And obviously, you know, we mentioned there about, you know, just releasing players, which obviously we're going to talk about in the next episode. But any final thoughts from you around player care?
Well, I think the environments that we're in, I think if we go along the lines of maybe challenging them as players, but more poignant and more important for me is developing them as people, then I think we're on the right lines.
Yeah, I just think that player care, that's all our responsibilities. And I think that, you know, doesn't matter who you're coaching, just be aware that you're dealing with other human beings as well.
There you guys have it. another coaching conversation with Pete Yas and our special guest Mark Rivers. Hopefully there's plenty of insights and questions that have come off the back of the conversation we've had. Leave us a comment, make sure you like, share and subscribe, and we'll be back next week.
Benny on the beat, boy.